If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths, and sometimes heights, to ensure the power is always flowing. Which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I'm here on the job site with Dale, who's a framing contractor.
Hey, good morning.
Dale traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for all his business vehicles. We're here where he needs us most.
Yep, they sure are.
We make it easy for him to save on all his insurance needs, all in one place, with coverage that fits his business and bottom line. Oh, I shouldn't have looked down.
It's all right.
We're so far up here.
Look at me. Take a deep breath.
Oh, I'm good. So good.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. Get more with Geico.
And as I'm walking around the lake, I start to hear this crying. And this crying is like all around me.
Welcome to Tell Me a Ghost Story, the late night call-in podcast where we delve into the world of the supernatural and explore the eerie and unexplained. I'm your host, Michelle Newman. This podcast features true stories from our callers that will send shivers down your spine and leave you questioning the existence of the afterlife. So grab a cozy blanket, turn down the lights.
Hi, Michelle. This is Mark from outside Des Moines, Iowa. I've never been one of those guys that believes in ghosts. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest. Farm fields, old barns, the occasional creaky house. But you just kind of chalk stuff up to, you just chalk it up to wind and raccoons and stuff. At least that's what I always told myself. This happened a couple of years ago. I was over at my buddy Dan's place, and we were drinking a couple of beers, and Dan's got this big picture window, and it looks out over his front yard, and the lights were up, but the moon was full, so we could see the driveway. We were mid-conversation when I see this movement out of the corner of my eye. I thought it was a deer or something at first. But then I see this face right up against the glass. It was pressed right up against the glass. It was like, it was pale in gray, but still like a human face. But it wasn't like a person standing on the porch. You could see the shoulders were too high and the head was floating, and the eyes were just too dark. And I didn't say anything at first, but then Dan stops talking, turns his head and whispers, "Mark, are you seeing this?" Yeah, and when I looked back, it was still there. It didn't move for maybe 5 more seconds. And then it just wasn't there anymore. There was no footsteps on the porch, no shadow moving away. It was just gone. So we both got up, opened the door, and ran outside. The grass was still wet from earlier, and there were no footprints anywhere. The thing is, if it were a person, it would have had to walk down the gravel driveway. We would have heard it. I'm still a skeptic. I want to believe there's a reasonable explanation, but I really don't know what it was.
Mark, I hear the skepticism in your voice. You grew up in the Midwest, barns and fields, and you've got a practical head on your shoulders. But you and your buddy both saw that face. And that's what makes it so chilling. It could easily be written off as a human trespasser if you want, but I don't know if that makes it any less scary. Peeping Toms are in my top 3 greatest fears. Looking over and seeing a face where it's not supposed to be is number 1. Number 2, tidal waves. And in the other parts of the world, such as the Philippines, there are stories of creatures that peer through windows waiting to be noticed. It could have been some elemental spirit out for a stroll, or a good old-fashioned ghost wanting one of your beers. You said you don't want to believe it, Mark. But sometimes the proof is just staring at you straight in the face.
Hello, Michelle. I am calling because I had a weird experience. The precognition experience. There was a feeling, and it was a bad feeling with Molly. A whole week where I could not stop thinking about her. I really couldn't. And it was like the one thought that it was like an intrusive thought. It just came over and over again. It just slammed itself into my head. It was a cycle. Like I'd say, she is gangly now, but got great bone structure and she's pretty. And then, when she just gets a little older, she's going to be a model. She'll be so beautiful. And then the next thought that just come to my head was like, she's not going to make it. It was crazy. Because she was a grade ahead of me. Not everybody in my grade really knew her. But I had known her since, we were in preschool. Yeah, when I first met her, and we went, and her mom was my art teacher. We went way back. It was a little bit of kind of pre-grief, and it was also just dread, but I kind of sort of punish myself, stop it. Why are you having these thoughts? And so, there was just a lot of layers of really just kind of thoughts and feelings. And then one day I, went to school, and so I walked into the cafeteria, and this girl says, "Hey, did you hear that? Molly died." And I said, "Oh yeah, I know." She died in a car accident. Clearly, that Denise, this person, she was the first person to tell me, because actually the same thing happened to me again about 2 years later when I was fishing out in the ocean. It was I spent one full day thinking about this guy he was a really great guy, actually. He was a valedictorian. He was captain or maybe quarterback of the football team. I can't remember. He was homecoming king. He was sweet, a super nice person. But my thought was, I just couldn't remember his name all day long. I was just all I could think about was him, and I couldn't remember his name. When we got back to shore, my mom says, "I have some bad news for you." And then, she tells me he died. We learned more about what happened. He was hit by a car in New York, and he didn't survive. And that the day that I couldn't stop thinking about him was the day that it happened. It didn't hit me as personally because, I didn't know him the way I knew Molly. Because it's very isolating kind of a feeling, just I don't want to let on that I'm crazy to people. Not that I am, but, it's that's how I think that people will feel about it. I was 38 when my oldest was born and 40 when my youngest was born. And I had pretty severe postpartum anxiety. And, I just had these thoughts of dread. But in my experience, it's just thoughts of dread, seem to be real. It took a lot of therapy, honestly, and exposure therapy to get to the point where, I could, manage and just understand what the real odds are, and put some of the dread and the panic and all of those intense negative feelings kind of to sleep a little bit. They're not going to overtake my life the way, that they were doing at the time.
Thank you for your story. I can hear how heavy this must have been for you to carry. To be a kid and to feel this dread about your friend Molly only to learn that she died, then to have it happen again, that can feel like more than coincidence. And maybe it is. I don't know. In folklore, what you've described is often called second sight. In Irish tradition, people with this gift would sense or even see death before it happened. In Greece, they believed that certain people were touched by the fates and given a glimpse of what was coming, whether they wanted to see it or not. I'm glad you were able to get help to manage the fear level that an incident like this would naturally cause. I think what you've described is a haunting of the mind, and honestly, some of those hauntings are harder to live with.
Hi, Michelle. I'm just calling in from London, and I wanted to share this story with you. My name is Harriet, and this takes place in Ireland, just outside of Galway. Then I was there with some friends, and I'd heard about this church that the preacher in the 1800s had just dropped dead mid-sermon. And apparently he was going to release some sort of, tell his congregation some sort of secret, and he just dropped dead of a heart attack right then and there. So apparently he haunts this church, and so we went to check it out, and it's still in use. And we walk in, and it's a dusty country church, it's it's just got kind of like heavy stale air, and so we're walking around, we're looking at stuff, and I'm starting to take pictures with my phone, and I'm taking pictures and I'm walking around, and then I start noticing that I'm getting these weird blurry lights. I'm getting these blurry lights in the middle of my photos, and there was no bright lights in the middle of the church. And so I have like a run of photos that just had this weird shape in the middle of it, just like kind of the shape of a, I don't know, maybe a human. But yeah, it was pretty strange. And then we went out and we walked around and looked at the old gravestones, and then we got some lunch.
Harriet, thank you. I love that you brought us to Ireland for this one. A preacher collapsing mid-sermon, about to reveal some great secret, sounds like a gothic ghost story just waiting to be told. And those blurry lights in your photos? Skeptics will say it's lens flare, but in Irish folklore, lights appearing in sacred or ruined places are often seen as soul fire, the energy of the dead lingering where they can't rest. You were expecting a dusty old church, but you came out with proof that something in there still wanted attention. But the most important question, where did you go for lunch?
Hey, Michelle, this is Rebecca. And I called my sister the other day because I was thinking about when we were growing up, she always had this imaginary friend named Dodd. And her and Dodd would go play and all this stuff, like out at the playground and all these things. And I was just thinking about it. And so I called her up and I was like, do you remember your imaginary friend Dodd? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, what did Dodd look like? And she's like, sat there and like was describing it and was just like, well, they had long splotchy hair. It was like they had bald spots. They always looked a little sick. They were really pale. And had really dark eyes, like black eyes. And they always seemed wet. They seemed sick, and they were always kind of like looked like they were wet. And as she was describing this, she realized like what she was saying, and I realized what she was saying, and anyway, I just thought I'd call in because it seems like Dodd might have been more than an imaginary friend.
Thank you, Rebecca. This story made my skin crawl. Kids with imaginary friends, we laugh it off, right? But the way your sister described Dodd, pale, wet, dark eyes, that doesn't sound like a playmate. That sounds like something that belongs to another world. In Western ghost stories, children sometimes encounter the spirits of other children who have died at a young age. And Dodd's sickly, dripping description feels closer to something darker, like a spirit that never fully left. And Rebecca, I think you're right. Dodd might not have been imaginary at all.
Hey. Am I actually connected? Okay. Hey, my name is Dan. I'm from Seattle. And this takes place in Seattle. There's a park called Green Lake there. It's pretty popular. If you're from Seattle, you probably know it. And one time I was walking around it in the morning, and there was no one around, and it was it was the middle of winter, so it was kind of gray and a little foggy, and it's one of those kind of spooky days. And as I'm walking around the lake, I start to hear this crying, and this crying is like all around me. And I'm looking around, I'm like trying to see if someone's hurt. Is there a homeless person around me that needs some help? Is something going on? But there's no one there. And I'm spooked. So I get out of there. And later I'm doing some research, because it kind of stuck with me. That whole experience was just kind of weird. So I'm doing some research, and I was looking up the history of Green Lake. And while I was doing some research, I was like seeing if a crime had happened, seeing if anything had gone down there. And I found this story about a woman named Sylvia Gaines, whose body was found in the lake in 1926. And she was 22 years old, and she'd come to Seattle to reconnect with her father, who was a World War I vet. And apparently, in the trial, it came out that they had unnatural relations. I'll let you fill in the blank there. And he had killed her in some sort of jealous rage and thrown her body in the lake. He was later sentenced to death and hung. But now people say they see a woman, a translucent woman, wandering around the lake, crying. And I was like, did I just meet Sylvia? Wow, I think I met Sylvia.
Thank you, Dan. I can hear in your voice how unsettled that moment left you. Walking alone around a lake, hearing crying coming from nowhere, everywhere, That's enough to make anybody run. Across the world, hearing crying is one of the most common reported hauntings. In Mexico, there's La Llorona, forever weeping near rivers and lakes. In Ireland, the Banshee warns of death with her wailing. And in Seattle, maybe there's Sylvia, a woman silenced in life whose grief still echoes around Green Lake. That's all we have this week, folks. Do you have a ghost story? Call 701-484-2666. That's 701-484-2666. Or go to tellmeaghoststory.com and leave your story there. Thank you to all the callers who left messages this week. And as always, I'm your host, Michelle Newman, signing off. See you next week.
Macabine.